Hello, and welcome to the Streets Will Never Forget podcast. With me, Callum, known as Trail. I've got with me Callum, known as Wall, and Rob,
Hello.
known as Rob. How are we, boys?
Yeah, all good, pal. All good now that we finally got that introduction
Hi,
down.
mate. You alright?
Yeah, not
How
bad,
are you,
thank you
babe?
very much. Yeah, not bad, thank
You
you.
alright, Wall, mate?
I'm good, pal. You know how it is.
Good.
Loving life.
Obviously, we've missed, for those avid listeners, they'll notice that there's been a delay of obviously some vehicular trouble. Is it all sorted now, Wall?
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously we missed last week's podcast because I was driving home and got stuck in the town centre. But, yeah, back at it again.
Back at it again. Back stronger.
Back stronger.
Back stronger, there you go.
So the eagle-eyed people among you all listening will have seen that today. This week we're doing Scott Parker as our Streets Will Never Forget football player. Scott Parker, of course, Premier League player, now manager of Fulham. Should be a very interesting one, as Rob has already said that he will not be changing his opinion no matter what we say. So you know that.
No, mate, mine's made up. Just go straight to rankings, mate. Straight to rankings.
Be a very quick episode.
Might as well not bother, yeah. But no. Of course, as always, we'll start with a little bit of a quiz. So, question number 1. In which advert did he appear in during the 1994 World Cup campaign?
Okay.
Was that advert you said, mate?
So, what was that, Rob?
Was that advert you just said?
Yes, advert. What advert was he in?
McDonald's.
Was it, mate?
It was McDonald's indeed, both of you.
Oh, a great guess.
I actually saw a Google when I was researching him. I was like, it said Scott Parker McDonald's advert.
Scott McDonald's Parker. He was a really overweight child.
What? I was like, this can't be the same guy. Like, what's he doing in a McDonald's advert? Scott McDonald, aka Steve McDonald.
I think it was strange. It was just him doing a couple of kick-ups in the back garden, I think, if I remember correctly. So question number 2. What renowned football injury did Parker receive, causing him to miss out on the League Cup final and semi-final in 2005?
Ligament, metatarsal, something like that.
He broke his metatarsal. Well done, Wall.
Come on.
And never knew what a metatarsal was until what's his name went out for the World Cup. Or the Euros, was it? Was it Rooney?
Was it? Yeah, was it a metatarsal, didn't he?
That was it, yeah. That ever since then, I've remembered what a metatarsal is. Question number 3.
His first few games, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, actually, I think. He had quite a few injuries, I think. Question number 3. Who is Scott Parker's brother-in-law?
This is, you know...
Got a bit of family tree.
Yeah, I can say first few...
footballer, innit? Someone famous.
First 3 episodes is all football related. This is more about his bloody life. This is hard. Yeah. I'm prepared for this.
Any ideas?
Is it someone... Oh, I've got a feeling it's another England footballer.
Matthew Everington.
Oh, how do you know that, Wall?
Oh, yeah. No, it's obviously not Matthew Everington, is it?
No, it's not. It's Harry Arter.
Yeah, I think I might have heard that, actually.
Yeah. Strange one, that, because he was on loan with him at Fulham last year, wasn't he? So he was literally playing for his brother-in-law.
Keep it in the family.
Keep it in the family, yeah. So look where I got him.
Bit of bias there, maybe, on the starting 11.
Yeah, exactly. I'm surprised there's not an investigation going on. For which club, question number 4, for which club did Scott Parker play every one of the 38 league games in 1 year? He only did it once. Who was it with?
Surely West Ham.
I'm going to say Charlton, I think.
It was Charlton in the 2001-2002 season. And finally, this one is competition between you both. It's the closest to the answer. You might already know the answer. But what is his win percentage as manager of Fulham?
Oh, wow. Is this just...
His manager of it, sorry, mate. Fulham.
Just Fulham, yeah. He's manager at Fulham.
Oh, I'm going to guess 38.5%, mate.
Oh, I'm going to say 34.
Is there any chance you know this, Rob?
There is, mate. It was on the Premier League stat.
It's 38.54% I've currently got.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I thought better than I thought. Yeah.
I mean, obviously in the Championship, it will have scored. It will have won a lot more games.
Yeah, played against shit people. So yeah.
Well, fair play to the lad.
So onwards we move to Scott Parker. Who would like to go first?
Robert, I feel like you are, as you've already have your solid opinion. I feel like let's get yours out of the way, and then we can try and break it down.
Yeah, let's go with that. Go on, Rob.
Well, for me, Scott Parker is arguably one of the most underrated defensive midfielders of the past 15 years.
Midfielders.
I think he's he was the defensive midfielder before it was such a huge role. Like, you think now things play with attacking midfielders and fullbacks bombing forward. The reality is that that's only possible. It only works if a team has a competitive and a competent holding midfielder.
Okay, War, what about you?
Oh yeah, I think obviously I have to agree. From especially his West Ham career onwards, well, West Ham and Spurs in particular, that's where I really think he came into his own and really solidified himself as a top class player. Because you got to think, West Ham went down in 2010.
Yeah.
He still got shortlisted for the Player of the Year, and he got the Players Right of the Year, Writers Player of the Year that year as well. And that shows the quality he had. I think he was also just he was a great player, had a lot of skills. He didn't score many goals, but when he did, they were great goals, big goals, passionate, cared about the team, wanted to win always, and that always enhances a player's ability when they have the desire as well as the quality.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had a little look at Scott Parker, and obviously, sometimes you forget he had the short stint he had at Chelsea, because he was only there for about a year, wasn't he? And I thought that was his only sort of,
It's
really
about
big
18 months, mate.
18 months. Yeah, that was his only sort of really big team he played for. But then I researched why they signed him, and he was signed as cover basically. And
Oh yeah,
is he going to start ahead of Lampard, McAlely, Robben? You know what I mean? Like, those are big names, aren't they? So
well,
yeah, I mean, we can discuss that. I mean, I suppose why did he never get another big club?
well, I think it's because it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I wouldn't say he wasn't good enough, because he wasn't good enough. Sorry, he wasn't not good enough. But I think the clubs he played for, he was always the key man there. Obviously he was captain at West Ham, big player for Newcastle as well. And when he came to Spurs, he won Spurs Player of the Year both years, I believe. Might be wrong, but anyway, he definitely won one of the years. He was an important player in his later career, because I think that role he sort of solidified himself in. I don't think he would have maybe described himself as a defensive midfielder when he was at Charlton and when he was at Chelsea. I only think it's probably when that sort of backfired and he's had to drop down a level, so to speak, and he's adapted his game and, to be fair, found a role that suits him best.
Okay, so
I would say, mate,
yeah, go on, Rob.
as I said earlier, I don't think he played for a big club because, well, certainly in terms of big clubs, I'd say, maybe not top six, but West Ham, Spurs, they are big clubs, aren't they, in reality? But the
West
reason he
Ham were
never played
relegated,
for a
weren't they?
top club is simply because, like I said earlier, his job was underrated. People didn't associate holding midfielders. I certainly, when you was growing up, I certainly didn't associate holding midfielders. No one sits there and truly appreciated the job they did until recently, until the likes of, like I've already said, people started to realise the jobs that Fernandinho and players like Conte did. It simply wasn't recognised, and I think what you want from a holding midfielder is you want someone who just sits in front, someone who can sit in front of the back four, someone who can break up attacks, someone who can cover the space, track runners, and essentially not allow the two centre backs to be drawn out, to be pulled out of position. You want them where they can defend, where they can attack the ball, leaving no space in between them. And I think that's what you got with Scott Parker. He was a player he was in the right position at the right times. He loved to tackle. When I look at it, I'm looking at 824 tackles, 76% tackle success, 1,324 recoveries, 317 clearances, and 486 interceptions. So that is exactly what you want from your holding midfielder. You just want someone who will literally break up the play and stop the counter attacks. And when you've got someone at that level, someone who can do that, you get success. There's no it's no coincidence that Man City under Guardiola hit their sort of peak and their sort of peak powers when Fernandinho was in his prime. It's simply because he was that underrated player, that unsung hero who would do the dirty work and allow the other players around him. Without Fernandinho, the likes of De Bruyne, the likes of David Silva would not have been able to flourish. And I think certainly when you look at that Spurs side, the likes of Van der Vaart and Bale, well, Modric as well, why were they able to flourish? Well, it's because they didn't have to worry about what was going on behind them because Scott Parker was there. But yeah, I think in terms of he didn't play for a big club or a top six club simply because the role was underappreciated.
So I suppose I really appreciate, I understand and agree with what you said there about Kante, because I think only people really started appreciating that role when Kante came to the fore with Leicester, because suddenly people were looking at this Leicester side and going, how are they winning? What are they doing? Sort of thing, and why are they suddenly this team that shouldn't be anywhere near the top of the league are suddenly leading it? And I think definitely, even myself, I'd agree. You notice it more now.
That was it, mate. When you looked at Leicester, the likes of Mahrez, Vardy, who else did they have at the time? Danny Drinkwater. They never have to worry about what was going on behind them, because the reality was that Conte was just that shield, wasn't he, in front of the back four, is that one who'd drive, who'd essentially cover the ground. They never needed to worry about what was happening behind them because he'd always be there. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Is that since then that role's been recognised, and we realise how valuable they are when we think now about how many teams play. Look at Liverpool, the way they get there. Liverpool's whole success has been built upon the fact that their fullbacks, Robertson and Alexander-Arnold, are able to get forward, and so that allows Mane and Salah to drift inside, and you've still got that width. The only reason they've been able to do that is because they've had the likes of Henderson and Fabinho, who've sat in front of the back four and essentially just cut off any counter-attacks. Without that pivotal figure, that figure I would say now is one of the most sort of lucrative almost roles in football. Is that without that you lose something. You lose an attacking force without a holding midfielder. There are so many clubs now who are willing to pay big bucks for holding midfielders. Look at Man City; they spent 50 million on Rodri, and the reason they spent that much is because they recognise how important now that position is.
Do you want to have a minute alone, Rob? I think you're in love with Scott Parker here.
I know. I feel like he's definitely he's very passionate about this. I love it.
You're related to him, but you his agent.
Are you related to him and Harry Arter?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think the way he played that position was definitely why he has such great success in the late stages of his career. A question like this. So this is the question I want to ask, and it's an interesting question. I want to see your opinions on it.
Mm.
So I'm going to just throw out two other names for you. Two other players that I would say played very similar roles to Scott Parker. And I want to sort of have your opinion on those players. So the first one is Michael Carrick, and the second one is Gareth Barry. So if you compare it, though, I want you to see your opinions on them compared to Scott Parker first. But I want you to think, well, Carrick played for Manchester United and Barry played for Manchester City. So we're talking about players who were great in these positions, and and Scott Parker didn't get a chance at a big club. Arguably, I'd say Barry and Carrick are very similar players. How did they get the opportunity, but Scott Parker didn't?
Yeah, I mean, if I was ranking those three,
I think
I would rank them Carrick, Barry, then Parker.
Where you, Rob, I feel like you're going to explode.
For me, it was totally different though, mate. Carrick, I don't see him as an out-and-out holding midfielder. He was someone. The reason Man United fans compared him to Paul Scholes was the simple fact that he would control the tempo of the game. He'd know when to play it short, when to play it long, when to quicken it, when to slow it down. So for me, you can't compare the two because I don't see Carrick the thing with Scott Parker was you were getting 100% commitment and dedication and a combative midfielder. So what Scott Parker would do is fully well he'd throw himself into a tackle no matter the consequences. Now I'm not at all saying Carrick was a bad player because you don't play that many games for Man United if you're a bad player, but just a totally different player. He wouldn't have done that. But that's because they aren't similar players. Carrick's more of a Paul Scholes-esque player.
What about Gareth Barry then?
Yeah, if you want to talk about playing a lot of games,
again, I'd rank Barry. I'd rank Parker above Barry.
Really?
Don't get me wrong. Gareth Barry. What was it? I think he's one of the all-time record holders, isn't he, for Premier League appearances?
I think he's the record holder.
But
yes, 680.
653.
But again, for me,
not sure.
For me, I'd say Scott Parker, I think, is a defensive midfielder, whereas Gareth Barry, I think, is a central midfielder. I think Gareth Barry would have been complimented playing alongside Scott Parker because I think that would allow him to have got forward more. I don't see them as two totally similar players, but obviously I know what you mean in the sense that occasionally they did in teams that did play the same roles, and I think at that point I would have rather had Parker over Barry.
It's fair enough.
Fair enough.
Just one thing I want to bring up is his role in the England setup. So he played for the under-16s, the under-18s, the under-21s. So he was a constant. And then for England itself, he only got 18 appearances. Do you think
that was over 10 years?
Do you think again, Rob, that's the thing of him not being recognised, or is there a different reason he didn't get more England appearances?
Well, certainly a lot of the sort of things I've looked at regarding his time at Charlton was that, I've read an article from a Charlton fan which essentially said up until the point Scott Parker left in that season, because I think he must have left in January, was that they were dreaming of a top 4 finish. That's how good he was playing and how well they were playing during that season, and in the end they finished 7th. But one of the things it says is that one of the key weaknesses of Scott Parker's career was that move to Chelsea. Had he never gone there, that essentially we've seen many players go to clubs, it's not worked out, and they've had to revitalise themselves. And obviously, it's when you're a footballer and you've been on the bench for so long and you've had that stigma, it's never an easy thing to do. So I think certainly for him, it took a while, didn't it, for him to sort of find that. And I think that's one thing he found afterwards, wasn't it? Was that when he left there, went to Newcastle, things improved there for him. But then it wasn't until he was totally revitalised during that West Ham period that we saw the Scott Parker that we should have seen a few years ago. So I think certainly in terms of England, I think when you look at things like the World Cup in 2006, imagine or obviously not that time, because he'd been playing for Chelsea, but you think about a setup which would have included Lampard and Gerrard being able to play their own games whilst having a figure like Scott Parker behind them. But obviously we that never worked because as a country we always played 4-4-2. But we've seen so many conversations about how Lampard and Gerrard couldn't play together because they were two similar players. They both wanted to bomb forward. Whereas you think, how well would that have worked had they had a player like Scott Parker who would have done that work for them and just allowed them to go and play their game? So I think one of the things I think was that, I know he played at the Euro 2012, didn't he? And I think I remember watching that tournament, and I think, he was one of we lost on penalties to Italy as per. But for me, he was one of the better players at that tournament. He was a player who deserved to be there. He was a player who deserved to start, and he was a player who performed well. So I don't think, and I think it's also easy to judge, isn't it? But when we think of the England teams over the years, one position we've never been short on, even when you look at it now, is midfield. Look at the likes of it now with Grealish, Maddison,
Mount.
All those Mount, the debate of who's going to go there, who's going to go to Euros, and that's sort of now. That's sort of now. You think about. I would argue that the team in 2006, with the likes of Hargreaves, Gerrard, Lampard, Carrick, that was a level above, wasn't it? So I think in terms of his appearances for England, we have to recognise that we were more than lucky with the sort of world-class midfielders we've had over the years. So I don't think we can hold that against him. But do I think he was underrated? Should he have got more England appearances? Yeah, absolutely. I think he should have.
Oh yeah, definitely. What
about you? What about you then, Walt? Where would you rank those two names and Scott Parker? Where would you rank them in order of, I suppose, skill? As a good player, as best player?
Well, I suppose as Rob has kindly pointed out, they're not necessarily all probably playing the same type of role, but I would argue they're all midfielders who would probably sit back in attacks.
Who would you put number one then?
Number one, I mean,
Michael Carrick.
I mean, I probably would have to say Carrick. Yes,
I knew you would. That's why I asked it, because I knew you would.
But I would put Parker second, and I would follow up with Barry. I do like Gareth Barry, but I think Scott Parker did have something about him
I mean, yeah, but then again, you've got to question why did Barry have so many appearances?
Well, yeah, he did have a lot of appearances. And actually, looking at England caps, he had the most England caps out of the three as well.
I don't think anyone can say Barry was a bad player. Like I don't think he was he? He's probably another one of those underrated, another one for later on in series.
He had 53 England caps, Gareth Barry did.
Yeah, he did. Won the Premier League with Manchester City as well.
Well, my grandma could have won the Premier League with Manchester City in those couple of years. I think I totally agree with both of you. I think you both made some good points. I suppose that just the next thing I want to move on to.
I think you rely on someone alongside him to do the dirty work, and so I think certainly Carrick, we should take him out of the equation because he is a totally different player, different type.
All
is
raging right now.
I'm not raging. I just completely agree. I do feel like he was. Oh. It wasn't strictly just a tough tackling midfielder that we're maybe labelling Parker as. But they definitely didn't let attacks glide by, especially in the later end of his career.
Wasn't that period though when United were on the absolute decline and absolutely terrible?
Well, that was the thing. Whenever he played, there was, I can't remember the exact stat, but there was a period where we played where we'd only win when he played. So I think that certainly would argue that his presence dictating and holding the line though was also like breaking up attacks is what we're on about, and that what makes him a great player. So
this just one final comment before we make our decisions. One thing I noticed is that Parker never stayed at a club for longer than about 4 years. Do you think that was he never found a place to settle? I mean, a quote I've got here from I think it was Alan Kirbishley is that when he realised that there was attention from Chelsea, his attitude changed, and he said that he accused him of his conduct in training not what it should have been. Do you think maybe there was some problems with his attitude? Because, like I say, 4 or 5 years with the club, never any longer than that. Somebody who we're saying somebody who's really was a good player. Why no longer than 4-ish years?
I think that's harsh, mate. To be honest with you, I think the reality is that Chelsea at the time, probably under the Abramovich era, would they'd probably quadruple his wage. So anyone who's going to do that, your head's going to get turned.
So it's about the money for him, do you think, not the football?
No, I don't think it's about the money at all. I think it doesn't matter what job you do. If someone's saying, we're going to pay you 4 times what you're on now, your head's going to be turned, isn't it? You're not going to be looking with the same level of commitment, no matter how hard you try with the job you're doing. But no, I think it's tough to question his attitude. I think 572 career appearances in total. There was captain at West Ham, captain at Newcastle after Alan Shearer retired. I've seen stuff about Carlton Cole essentially saying how Scott Parker dragged him from 3-0 down to a 3-3 draw in one game at half time. We've got a midfielder, and I think we'd again do him a disservice to just call him a holding midfielder, because I think he was more than that. He was someone who could, he wasn't sort of, a player who would, unlock a defence, but he was certainly someone who could play a pass forward. He was someone who could bring the ball forward. But in terms of a player, we're dealing with someone who was combative, driven, someone who was calm, who had dedication, and I think that's sort of key traits. Now we often sit there as fans, certainly watching games, and think, are they really up for it? Do they really want it? And when you see Scott Parker, you never question that about him. You never see him pull out of a tackle.
Yeah.
Even if it meant he was going to get injured, he'd never pull out of a 50-50. Yeah. He'd put his head in where it hurts. And I think that was the sort of player he was. And I certainly remember when we think back to when Tottenham signed him in 2011, and you looked at sort of their local rivals, Arsenal, in 2011, that would have been a player again who Arsenal were crying out for. Someone who was a leader, someone who would stick the foot in, someone who would go about and put themselves about and fly into challenges. So I think I think in terms of him only being at a club for 4 or 5 years, that's simply just a natural cycle for players now, isn't it? Very, very rarely do we see players stay for 10, 12 years at a club.
No, I just before we make our decisions, this is just a quote I found, and I'll just say that, and then we'll see what we think after that. So, what Parker does instead is win games. He does this not by punctuating the match, but by controlling it. He smothers oncoming attacks. He forces opponents off the ball. He orchestrates distribution out of the back, setting in motion a Spurs onslaught that will culminate 60 yards downfield. You can't watch the game up close without noticing Parker.
Is that a quote from Rob?
That is, he actually was said, yes. He
I
said
wish,
to me just
mate.
before, so can you read this out?
Need to get signed up for a football analyst if that's mine.
With Scott Parker as Iron Mate, you get the job.
Who was that then? Was that
Fulham needing any assistant coaches at the minute, do we now?
Send him an email, mate.
You'll be
Send him an email.
straight
See what they say. It was Anton Ferdinand.
Really?
No, I'm joking. It wasn't. It was an American journalist called William Salatin.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, yeah, he's completely right. I think, especially when he was at, like I say, West Ham and Spurs, particularly, I think to say he's actually probably getting older at that time. Those around the peak of his powers, as Rob says.
Agreed.
That was when he really came into his own. That defensive midfielder role was starting to maybe be recognised a little bit more because he was playing so well in it, and they were like, "Well, what's he doing that's so good?" So yeah, definitely, I think when Spurs signed him, he did exactly what he needed to do, play the exact role that he needed to, because they had the players, they had Luka Modric, they had Bale, they had Van der Vaart, they had the attacking players. He didn't have to come, then Nico Kranjčar.
Yeah. Exactly, what a legend he was.
They didn't have to. He didn't have to run up the pitch and do all these bits and bobs that other teams maybe necessarily needed him to do or other players to do in his role. He just was able to sit back, hold, break up the play, pass the ball, as a lot of players do now,
Yeah, so
I'd also totally agree with that statement, mate. There's that idea of, what did it say, punctuating 60 yards up the field, that unless you have someone who's willing to do that dirty side of the game and who's willing to follow runners and just sit back in front of the back four and protect them, unless you have that, then you simply don't have the capacity to let your attacking players flourish. You cannot move up the pitch without that. So yeah, I totally echo that and totally agree with it.
So we'll move on to the ranking. I'll just remind you again of what the ranks are. I mean, Rob, we don't need to ask you really.
Yeah, I did to ask Rob.
We'll go through the ranks.
Can we make a new rank for this one for Rob?
Yeah. Rank number 1 is The Streets Should Never Forget. Rank number 2 is The Streets Should Remember Him. Rank number 3 is The Streets Can Do What They Like. Rank number 4 is The Streets Should Probably Forget. And rank number 5 is The Streets Should Definitely Forget. Let's go to Rob first.
Well, it might surprise you to know, mate, but I actually have a shirt from Euro 2012 with number 8 and Scott Parker on the back. But for me, it's going to be, I think for me, it's top 1.
Top dog.
Top tier for me.
I think you don't need to explain it anymore, Rob.
I think he was someone who the role was underappreciated at the time. And for me, the role now it's an integral part of football. It's an integral part of the way teams play. And just because it was 15 years ago, it didn't get the appreciation it deserves. And I think what the job he was able to do, the commitment, he was the pinnacle for any football fan watching their team. He was a player that, he's the player we all want to see, the commitment, the loyalty, the attitude, the dedication to the game. For me, it doesn't get any better than that. So exactly as I've said, I won't change my opinion from the start, and I haven't. He's going to be top 1. He was, such an underrated player, and doesn't get the recognition he deserved, neither as a player or actually a manager, because to bring Fulham back out of the Championship after suffering a humiliating relegation, having spent 100 million to pick that club up and do what he's done to bring them back, shouldn't go unnoticed as well, because that's a hell of achievement. And then even now, for them to be battling to stay up, considering they've spent very little, is another huge achievement. So for me, underrated as a player and underrated as a manager.
Wall, do you want to marry Scott Parker?
I mean, I feel like Rob's pretty much got that proposal set up.
Yeah. Where are you going to put him?
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to definitely make Rob pissed off here. No, no. I'm going to go rank 2. I'm not going to go rank 1. I'm going to go rank 2. I'm going to say same as Ricky. I think, yeah, as Rob says, he sort of made this role, or sort of brought it into, the average footballer watcher's eyes and thought, this is this guy plays really well. He does all this stuff. I've never really seen this role get all this recognition before.
Yeah.
But I think, as we've sort of mentioned in the last couple of times we've spoken, does he have that moment? Does he have that standout moment? Probably not. The moment that's like, yes, this is why I remember him. This is it. Yes, he tackled really well. He could, dictate the play as well, and he worked hard.
But that's the point of him being underrated. Is that the role goes unnoticed. His role goes unnoticed because he's so good at it. So he doesn't have that one standout moment because he doesn't need to have, because the players who played around him would have known how important he was.
Fair enough.
No, but like I say, great player, really is, really good quality, passionate, driven, hard working. I think he would have thrived in a bigger team. But we say big, like you say, we'll say, a title challenging team. He would have definitely fitted in well, playing for a team that was looking, was battling for trophies, playing in Champions League football. He would have thrived in that. Unfortunately, obviously, he didn't get that opportunity in his career, but a great player nonetheless.
So I think
you put him in rank 3, mate, I'm leaving.
No, it's rank 4. I would have to agree with Wall. I think rank number 2. The Street should remember him. I think you've got a special love for him, Rob. Maybe it's the connection of the England shirt you've got. I don't know, and the memories attached to that. Great player.
The memories of pain and heartbreak on penalty shootouts.
Yeah, you have. I think what Scott Parker falls into for me is a bracket of underappreciated English players, because the English team at the time of him playing, it was like we were very set on the people that could play and the people that couldn't play. Now, we mentioned obviously Gareth Barry. Again, I know he played 53 times for England. That surprised me because I thought he was one of the ones who was, not appreciated.
Yeah, I thought it was a later arrival.
Barry, Scott Parker, Joe Cole for me, I think was another incredible player. I don't know how many caps he got.
Mate, he's got to be one on this podcast.
All right, Scott Parker will think he'd leave it.
What a player Joe Cole was.
Joe Cole, left me
a great player.
But there's a lot of English players who just didn't get a look in because, well, you're not Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, so you don't get a look in. You're not Wayne Rooney, Michael Owen, David Beckham, whatever, you don't get a look in. Now, I'm sure there were games where they played, these people and they did play those games, but I never remember growing up people talking about, Scott Parker, oh yeah, he's got to go, or Gareth Barry's got to go to the World Cup, whatever. It was just very much like, we've got Gerrard and Lampard, they're going to win us the World Cup. That's it, thank you. Just
there was never any big discussion, was there, about who deserves to go. It was always like, these guys are going because they're apparently the best we've got. And well, I think that the England camp is a discussion for another day, because that conversation could go on for a long time.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm saying rank 2. Wall, you're saying rank 2 as well. Rob, you're saying rank 1.
I'm saying rank 1 plus.
That puts him at the same level as Ricky Lambert and above Nico Crenshaw.
Disgusting.
So well, I know how offended you were, Wall, because you married Nico, don't you?
We've established that Nico Crenshaw did not have the stats.
Okay. So thank you very much again, both of you, for joining me. We've already got a player lined up for next week, so that's going to be really exciting. This is my suggestion next week, so fingers crossed this is a good one. Thank you very much for joining me, boys. It's been lovely.
Cheers, thank you very much.
That's all right, mate. I'm off to wear my Scott Parker shirt.
Yeah, get Rob off to see Scotty P.
I'll tell you what, if I ever get the chance, if I got the chance to meet a Premier League footballer or manager, I wouldn't pick anyone from Arsenal. I'd say, I've got a friend who wants to meet Scott Parker, and I'd bring you along, mate. And you'd be like the kid who's just met his idol, stood next to him, get him to sign the shirt.
Can I have one of his famous jackets he's been wearing on touchline?
Probably, mate. It's Scott Parker's probably. He's quite down to earth. I bet he's only got one jacket.
Yeah, wash it once a fortnight.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Live in Fulham.
Thank you very much, boys.
That's all right, mate. See you later, mate.
Take care.